All right, well, I'll start with that one. Well, what I've seen, I wouldn't say, what I'm going to talk about is not the legacy that I've seen in work, but in public. The poster became, this image actually just, went around, and it became, for a lot of people, one of the seminal images for them, and one of the most positive images for gay men and lesbians to see. And so when I was working for a national AIDS organization, so I was traveling all around the country, and I would see this poster and a variety of, in gay bars or in offices and all sorts of places. The thing that really frustrated me about this poster is that that's me kissing a girl, So that's my legacy.
That's you giving a white woman.
It's actually the gay Puerto Rican man kissing the white lesbian. All right, because that's the ironic part about it. But what I found was that one of the things that Gran theory did, that the image became something that was almost in some ways universal. It became such a positive image for folks. I don't know how many people will come up to me and say, I've had that picture up on my refrigerator for years, and this is one of the first things that I got when I was coming out of the closet, and so it was really sort of, that made me feel good to understand that Fury had done something beyond what we intended to do.
I would say, I don't know, I think that one of the legacies of John, I would say just like in the mid-'80s, when many people in their 20s who did not have experience in civil disobedience learned from the generation before them, who had been active in the 60s or in the 70s, and things like the anti-Vietnam movement, or later in the 70s movements like the anti-apartheid movement, or anti-apartheid movement, or activism around Nicaragua. There was a kind of intergenerational teaching. There was an idea of what civil disobedience was. Maxine is here in the audience, and she's the one who I learned an enormous amount about the legacy of what activism meant and how it could be applied. So I think that one of the legacies that's become clear to me, and when in the times I went down to McCarty Park and went to the Occupy Wall Street demonstrations, I saw notably a number of very vocal members of ACT UP from the day who were there imparting that knowledge forward. So there is some idea of passing on these tactics, which are well-trodden, which precede us in the 80s, and ideas of how direct action civil disobedience has worked before, and how it creates a language. I'm less personally inclined to want to quantify things using the art world as the yardstick. That's fine, we can use the art world, that's great. I think that, the art world after 1993, it could have been less sexy to make activist work. It was vulgar and hideous to make politically based work for a period of time. We should cut up styrofoam cups and quilt for a while, I don't know. We were doing a lot of decorating. And then, you started to see the rise of kind of polemical, activist, collective-based work again. The Yes Men. There are a number of collective-based projects that have existed again, and I find personally that heartening. I find the art world a very weird yardstick to measure this stuff through, personally. So I don't really find, I can chart where we are in the years by the art world, but I don't know that it's really speaks so much to the legacy. And I know on a personal level there will be a teach-in between some members of Occupy Wall Street and Gran Fury that's coming up later in March. I'm honored by the idea that we're being sought. Jesus God, what do we have to offer these people? But in the same way that probably Maxine was like, Jesus God, what do I have to offer these people? I'm going to suck it up, that's middle age, and say, okay, this is what I've learned. Or this is what we've learned collectively, and those are the legacies. The possibility of direct action, and what happens when you're optimistic enough to meet on a regular basis and try to say something. And that, basically.
I think I'm going to agree with Tom in the ways in which I gauge the legacy. In some ways, I'm surprised that anyone is familiar with the work, actually. I know that sounds coy, but I'm only recently discovering that there is some familiarity, particularly with young lesbians, with our work. But I sort of gauge, the way that I gauge the material is, again, the quiet moments that you didn't see, that whenever I speak about, with students, and I bring up the way that the New York Times was disseminated, when you see the piece on a gallery wall or in a book, it's in some way domesticated and in other ways sort of irrelevant. But I think I notice a light go off in people's eyes when I say, with a couple of rolls of quarters, we just quietly in the middle of the night stole the news for a day. Now, we don't know the effect that that had, or, I mean, that's a great claim to make, but I do know, as one of the teams of people who went around and did it, how empowering it was. And it almost didn't matter whether it was efficacious or not. And another sort of quiet moment that is only now public because I mentioned it in the catalog at some point. Shortly after we did, well actually I think it was well after we did Read My Lips, I got a phone call from, I don't know if it was Robert Reiger at the, who was heading the Active Workspace. I don't remember if it was him, but somebody called me from the Active Workspace and said, somebody's called about the Read My Lips poster, and they were actually one of the two men in that image, and they wanted to speak to someone from Grand Fury, and I gulped, because I thought, well, here comes that lawsuit. But I called this person, and it was an older gay man. Right.
I'm being the illustrated version for you.
Carol Merrill. In California, and he told me the story. And he basically, you know, he and his boyfriend were both sailors. They were on leave in San Diego. They were at a gay bar. A well-known fashion photographer was in LA shooting, and that photographer's assistant. And I couldn't really get him to say who it was, but he thought it might be Horst, was the photographer, not the assistant. The photographer's assistant met them in the gay bar and asked if he could photograph them. They went back to his place, and in his words, we got carried away. And I didn't think anyone, we found it in a porn magazine from the time.
The guys had their penises out. That's the bottom of the thing.
Yeah,
that's the bottom of the
image. And he said, I didn't think anyone would ever see that picture, but I wanted you to know that it means so much to me that this thing that we did, that we thought no one would see, could have positively impacted anyone's life in any way. I just wanted you to know how meaningful that was to me. And that was enough for me, and I didn't actually tell anyone about it until we started meeting. But I feel like those moments, the roll of quarters, the guy on the phone, those are really how I gauge the work.
Legacy. I don't know. You know, the Grand Fury's work is so, is whatever. It was so much about direct action. It was about being in the world. It was about being a tool. It was about, it wasn't about product. It wasn't about profit. It wasn't about, like, mastery. So, in a sense, I think it was just another cog in the wheel of direct action. A lot of, we stole, something nobody's really mentioned here, is that we were constantly referencing, like, a lot of feminist strategies from the 70s, situationist filtered into our thinking and talking. We were just one more molecule of whatever that trajectory is. And that trajectory today, I don't know, is it Occupy Wall Street? Is it Yes Men? Is it Ad Busters? Is it LTTR? I don't know what it is. I think there's veins of it going forward. I don't think the legacy is about, like, oh, you know, I don't think it's Rikrit to Venetia. I don't think that's our legacy. I don't think it's, what is it? Transactional,
social sculpture, let's call it. Whatever they're called.
Trans something, trans-relational realism, or whatever the hell it is. It's not that.
Well, that sounds good.
It sounds good if you know what the right name is. But I think it's just part of a momentum, and sometimes the momentum's really strong, and sometimes the momentum is less. But I don't think the legacy lies in this kind of like history of mastery. It's not like, okay, there was Pollock, and then de Kooning, and then blah blah, and then Grand Fury. It's not in that kind of legacy of the master. It's a different.
But I do think it's interesting, actually, when you